All right. So, like I said, my name is Tabari Zahir. Um, Today, we are going to be talking about one of the grand challenges of social work. I am also an alumni of this school. I graduated from Cal State San Bernardino with my master's in social work. All right. So it's good to be back. And yeah, the grand challenges. Anybody heard of the grand challenges of social work? All right, you got some research to do. Okay? You should look this up. There are 12 grand challenges of social work. In other words, the NASW, National Association of Social Workers, they have an agenda. And with that agenda, they're trying to solve problems, okay? On a national scale and on a global scale. I don't know all of them by heart, right? But the one that I do know about and the field that I work in is around mass incarceration. That's number 9 of the grand challenges, okay? That's number 9. There's other ones like homelessness, access to health care, right? Like all these grand important things, all right? And so I just wanted to kind of talk to you guys about that today, all right? Mass incarceration. Why? Why do I want to talk about mass incarceration? When I was going through this program, it was one of the least things that was talked about, okay? Is there anybody in here that's doing an internship at an organization that works with like reentry, mass incarceration, anything like that? No one. You see the issue here? Okay. The social workers were criticized about this. Mass incarceration really took off in the late 1970s. All right. Lawmakers were passing laws to lock up certain segments of the population. And it led to overcrowding in the prison system. And of course, it was not evenly distributed amongst the criminals. It was focused on the urban areas and who's in the urban areas. They're poor, they're brown, they're black. Okay? So this is one of the issues that social workers were criticized about, because while it was happening, they were silent while it was happening. Okay, and we're going to talk about how it happened. We're going to talk about its history, why it happened, and all of that. All right. But I want to bring it to your attention because when I was going through this program, I was really the only one in my class that was talking about it. Okay, I was the only one. It was one of the grand challenges. Nobody knew about it. The professors weren't talking about it. The students weren't working in the field. They didn't have internships in the field. And by the way, we do accept internships. I think we're full right now. I think we have like 3 people at our building. Okay, so why is this important to me? Why? Why mass incarceration? Why is it important to me? I grew up in the urban areas. Okay, I grew up I was born in Ohio, but my father's family was from LA. So I lived in LA, spent a lot of time in LA, lived up in Oakland. Okay, grew up poor, right? I was exposed to all the ills of the urban centers, the helicopters at night chasing people, drug dealers on the corner, alcohol stores on every corner. Intergenerational trauma. Intergenerational trauma. It has been passed down from generation to generation to generation. And then all of these people that have this intergenerational trauma are packed into these urban centers. All right? If you want to know why a lot of abuse, well, we'll just take something simple, something that everybody can relate to. The N-word. Why is this word so common? Now, of course, it's because of popular culture now, right? It's in the rap songs, it's on the TV shows, it's on the the movies, things like that, right? But before it got that type of credibility, that was because of intergenerational trauma. All right? This was what the slaves were called by their overlords. They took it in and then they passed it along. All right? That's what that's from. And you can look at any minority population and you'll see the same thing. It might be different. If you look at the American Indians, they have their issues, right? A lot of it is like around diet and stuff like that, but it's intergenerational trauma. If you look at Latinos, there's some intergenerational trauma that's specific to that group. And the same thing with African Americans, okay? So I saw this growing up in these urban centers. And to make a long story short, I got involved in the drug trade very early, right? I was about 16 when I left home, started making a lot of money. The streets are, the thing about the streets is that you get instant gratification in the streets, all right? Instant gratification is what you get when you get into the streets. What do I mean by that? The only thing you need is a little bit of heart and a gun, and you can enforce your will on the world, okay? That's all you need. If you're gonna rob somebody, all you need is a gun. If you're gonna sell drugs, you need to know how to count a little bit too, but you're gonna learn that very quickly, right? Oh, how much is a gram? The gram is this. How many is it? He wants 10 grams. Okay, this is what it's gonna cost, right? You learn that stuff. You learn that real fast, okay? You become a chemist. You start learning how to concoct stuff, all right? But you get instant gratification on the streets. You're making money. By the time I was 17 years old, I would see $30,000 a month, cash. By the time I was 17. All right? Instant gratification. Now, what could I do with that money? Whatever I wanted. If I wanted women, I could have women. If I wanted to travel, I could travel. Right? Whatever I wanted. If I wanted a fake ID, I'm going to get a fake ID. If I want a car, I'm going to instant gratification at every level. Okay? But it's because of trauma. All right? It's because of trauma. My father was killed. My father was killed when I was about 8 years old. My mother remarried, but it's not the same. And he was pretty abusive himself. So the streets for me was more attractive. I escaped the streets. Okay? I escaped the streets. By the time I was about 19 or 20, and things were starting to spiral out of control, I was on these watch lists and you know what I mean? I remember one time I went to Mexico and I stayed in Mexico for a few weeks. And when I came back, I was stopped in customs. And there were some detectives that wanted to talk to me because some stuff had happened while I was gone that I didn't know nothing about. But some guys thought I lived in this house. They went in. I lived in this apartment. And the guys who were coming to rob me thought that I still lived there. But another family had moved in when I had moved out. Right? And one of the reasons why I went to Mexico is because I wanted to get away. Like, it was too much stuff going on. Right? I think I was 18. Yeah, I was just able to, either 18 or 19. I think maybe I just turned 19. And so I go into, I'm coming through customs and they're like, yeah, some detectives want to talk to you, right? So they're holding me. I was in Denver. And the detectives come out and they start asking me all these questions. Like, I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, you see where I'm coming from? Like, I'm in the airport. Like, what would I have to do with that? Like, I'm going to rob myself? So what ended up happening was these guys looking for me, wanting to rob me because they knew I was a moneymaker. They broke into the house. There was a woman and her children in the house. They tied them up and put them in they was asking them, where's the drugs? Where's the money? And then they put them in the closet while they ransacked the house. And so the detectives were trying to figure out what I had to do with it, right? But that put the detectives on notice that, okay, he's part of this drug world, right? He's young, but he knows all these players, okay? That's what I mean when I say I escaped, because I saw the writing on the wall. Like, this is not this isn't going anywhere. Either I'm going to end up dead because I was in some shootouts, right? Dudes did one time, caught me slipping, broke into the house, shot the house up while I was in it, right? Long story. We don't have enough time for that, right? But what ended up happening was this. I have these habits now, okay? So I ended up getting out of the drug world and I'm trying to go straight, but I have habits. What do you think those habits are? What do you think those habits are? Thank you. I got to have it. I got to have that money, right? I'm used to that, okay? I'm used to not, if I'm walking around, I got at least 10 grand in my pocket. Not right now, this is my phone, all right? Don't misunderstand, okay? But I'm used to that. I'm 20 years old, 21 years old. I've seen hundreds of thousands of dollars. So I have that habit. But I ended up getting married and I ended up having a few children and everything was cool until I was about 25. And then some old friends came into my life and it was like, I'm just shortening the story for you. Let's get some money. And I think I'm slick, right? Like, okay, I'm just going to finance the operation. I'm not going to actually be on the streets moving anything, right? But these dudes was moving weight from LA to Philadelphia. It went bad. I ended up catching a case, a federal case, all right? And I got 17 and a half years in prison. Now, I don't care what your politics are, right? I don't care how you feel about Obama, right? But Obama did something good for me, all right? And I went to trial, and I lost trial. But when Obama came to office, he signed an executive order that people who they didn't have like a long history of, felonies and stuff like that, they could go home if they didn't have violence on their record, they weren't part of a gang and, all of that kind of stuff. So I ended up benefiting from that. I did do 11 and a half years. I did 11 and a half years. Right. You didn't know that when I walked in this room, right? I did 11 and a half years in federal prison, and I learned a lot from that experience. Federal prison is not like state prison. In the feds, you got people from all over the world. They're very educated. You see executives that got caught for white-collar crimes, and you're learning from them. They teach you how to buy and sell on the stock market. It was another formative experience in my life. But that was the time when I was like, I'm never coming back to this place. So I got to walk up, and I got to go right. I got to go straight, all right? So I told you all of that. I came home in 2016. I went, and another thing is like I had traveled the world by that time. So I didn't go into jail not knowing anything. But by the time I got convicted and, actually got my sentence, I had already been to of course, Mexico, Canada, all of the capitals of Europe, right? The Western Europe. So Zurich, Paris, Amsterdam, Madrid, Spain. Like I had traveled the world. Then I've been to some other faraway places. I have been to Pakistan twice. I have been to Turkey, been to Tunisia a couple of times, North Africa, Morocco, probably a dozen times, right? So when I went in, I already had kind of like an education, right? Not a formal education, but life education. And so while I was in there, I just took some time, to make up my mind, go straight. And then this became very important to me. Doing this work became very, very important to me. And so while I was in there, I was studying with this organization that you see right here, Tabari Foundation. I was studying with them. And when I came home, because of the work, some of the things that I was doing while I was in there, they asked me to write a book that introduces their curriculum. And eventually they brought me on as, first I did like writing some curriculums for them. They have like over 20 courses and some editing and commentaries and stuff like that. But eventually they asked me to start a reentry program out here in San Bernardino. So we got a couple of grants. We were able to get it going. And so now we have contracts with like the County of San Bernardino, CDCR, which is the prison complex out here, all right? I get phone calls now. This is crazy, right? So I was down in, I got a phone call one day from some federal judges, and they wanted me to come down to Riverside and present to their program that, they kind of have like a diversion program where people, instead of sending them to prison, they run them through this program, because they're addicted to drugs or they're trying to overcome, different habits or whatever. And they wanted me to come and present because they knew about our program. But what they didn't know is that I had been to prison. So when I went into the courtroom, and it was 4 judges and probation officers and lawyers and people running the program and stuff like that. So when I started telling them my experience, I just seen them lean back in the chair like, oh, wow, who's this guy? I told them the last time I was in the federal courthouse, I got 17 and a half years. They were like, what? Like, yeah. But everything comes full circle, right? Because now they need our help. And who's the experts in mass incarceration? Who's the experts? Those who have been through it. Okay? Those who have been through it. Any questions so far? I know I'm just pouring a lot of stuff on you. Guys lucky I'm not your teacher because I like to talk. I like to give up a lot of information, and I'm going to hold you accountable for it. All right? All right, so let me just talk to you a little bit about Taba, and then I'll go through my little slideshow. All right? So we're right here in San Bernardino. We basically have 3 programs. We have an educational program. Part of it is religious. The Taba Foundation is founded by a group of Muslims out of the Bay Area. And the goal was to educate Muslims who are incarcerated. There's a lot of other religions, they come into the prisons, and they, there's a lot of Christian groups that have curriculums and things like that. There's over 200,000 Muslims in prison. A lot of them have converted while they're in prison, and nobody was servicing them as far as education, teaching them the religion of Islam, okay? And so Taba started that 20 years ago, and like right now we have over 10,000 students nationwide. So every semester we have like 2,000 books and stuff that go out to these students so that they can learn the religion correctly. So that's the academic portion. We also have like a secular portion where they learn like motivational interviewing. They learn rap. Has anybody ever heard of rap? It's like a wellness reentry program. They're just learning like how to set goals, and it's evidence-based and everything. I didn't get trained on it, so I don't know much about it, but that is something that we do. That's something that we offer to people who are incarcerated. And it doesn't matter what your religion is. Like, we don't care. If you want to study with us, you can study. It's no problem, right? So that's that part. Then we have life skills, all right? We have life skills. So life skills is basically, you guys should know. You're the masters. You guys are masters of social work now. So you should have some idea of what life skills are. It's exactly that, right? Skills that help you to facilitate your goals in life. And this is really important for our population because a lot of them have never had a bank account, right? So they need to learn financial literacy, all right? Technology literacy. Yeah, when I came home, after doing 11 years, I was in the airport with my brother. We were flying back out to LA, and he was asking me, what do you want your Gmail to be? And I was like, what's Gmail? I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what Google was, right? And let alone the suite, like the whole suite, the docs and the doc. It was overwhelming. And to see how fast the society had changed in just 11 years, it was something, right? It seemed like all the cars were going really fast because they're lighter, and it like the whole world had changed in those 11 years. The smartphone. Well, my sister picked me up from the prison in Georgia, and she had WhatsApp open. I'd never seen it before, didn't know what it was, right? And she was telling me she wanted me to record a message for my mother, who was in Africa at the time. So she said, talk to her. And I didn't know that I could just, like, she's holding the button. I could just speak into the phone to send a message. So I'm trying to take the phone from her so that I can say, hey, Mom, you there? I didn't understand applications, okay? And she was like, no, just speak. But it was foreign to me, so I didn't know what to do. And then I had to learn all of this stuff. I had to come out and learn the difference between Microsoft Office, Google Suite, applications. You have millions of applications to do all of this stuff. I thought at the time you had to remember all of these logins and passwords. It was crazy. It was crazy, right? But luckily, I was already in school, and because Coastline Community College is down in Fountain Valley, they have a program where they go into if you're a California resident, you can get an associate's degree through them. So I had started that maybe 2 years before I came home. So I went right into the college system, and I just didn't stop until I got my master's. So I'm saying all of that to say that you need technology literacy coming out of prison, even if you just do 5 years. Okay, even if you just do 5 years, you need technology literacy, and we offer that in our program. Okay, so financial literacy, technology literacy. We also offer some other life skills. I'm drawing a blank. Just like parenting skills, like teaching people you've been gone for your family 5, 10 years. How do you reconnect with them? All right? How do you reconnect? And this is where social workers, especially clinical social workers, can be a huge help. All right? Like just teaching people how to use I statements instead of you. Right? I statements, where you accept the blame for yourself. No, I feel like this. The way I understood it was like this. Because as soon as you say, no, you, the way you, the person shuts down, right? Or their defense mechanisms come out, right? So just teaching someone that came home how to use I statements will go a long way in helping them to reconnect with their family. Like those soft skills. How to go into an office space where the politics are different than prison. It's still politics, but it's different than prison. And prison is automatically violence. And so you learn the language of violence. How to talk to somebody like, man, I'm not playing with you, man. Right? Like I would do such and such, but you can't do that in the office or in a university setting. So you have to learn how to use soft skills. You have to say, hey, man, I don't understand. Right? Can you show me that? But the violence can't be the first thing. I'm telling you, this is serious. These are serious things that people have to learn after they come out of that environment. Okay? So those are an example of life skills. And then after that, we have mental health and substance abuse programs. Like I do anger management classes. I'm also working on, after I have my associate number to become, and so I am registered with the state right now. I'm getting my hours towards becoming an LCSW, which is a licensed clinical social worker. All right. And, but, right, in this world, you also need the drug and alcohol license. You need both. They're two different things. You have the mental health license and the drug and alcohol license. And if you get both of those, you can demand your pay. You can go into any organization and say, this is what I want. All right? I'm telling you, I do it all the time. Because not only do I work for Table, but I have contracts with, like other places. And I'm like, no, $50 an hour is not enough. And I've said that. That's not enough. You give me $65 an hour, we can talk. And they call you back a week later and say, okay, let's talk. I'm telling you the truth. All right? If you have both of them. All right? So after you get your master's, you really can't start working on that one until you get your master's, the drug and alcohol license. You get your master's, and what happens is that it automatically kicks you up to become a licensed advanced alcohol and drug counselor. There's some people that they're counselors, but they just went through the regular training. It probably took them about 3 years, to get it. But once you have your master's, you go through so you have to do 1 more year of academic training, and then you get your hours. Then that's it. You can go anywhere with that. You can teach, you can work, you can have your own private practice, right? It's all kinds of things, okay? So in a nutshell, that's what we do. Okay, so listen, I talked to you about this. It's called Promote Smart Decarceration. That's what they call it in the grand challenges. Like if you go to the NASW website, this is what they call it, Promote Smart Decarceration. And this was recently added, right? Like within the last maybe 3 years, they added this because the social workers were complicit. The social workers were complicit, all right? Don't fall into this trap. Sometimes you have to stand up, you have to take a stand. When you know that something is wrong, you have to take a stand. What the social workers were doing is they were going into the justice system And they were working as social workers. And they saw the conditions. They began to understand what was happening, these traps that minorities were falling into, going through the justice system. And they were silent for decades. They didn't say anything. Okay? Because who's their boss? The justice system. Okay? The justice system. Even today. For example, a lot of people in prison don't want to talk to the social workers. Even though you might come in there and you say, hey, listen, I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I just want to help you, teach you some coping skills. I want to teach you better communication skills, whatever, right? They're not going to talk to you. You know why? Because you have to report back to administration. And if you go back and you tell administration, the warden or whoever your boss is, hey, this guy was feeling depressed, and he said that sometimes, in your case notes, he says that sometimes he feels suicidal. When he comes up for parole, that's going to be on his jacket. He's not going to get parole. You think you're helping him, you're hurting him. Right? This is what's happening. This is what I mean when I say that the social workers were complicit. They were part of the problem. And they're just now saying, let's back up a little bit and let's detangle ourselves. Let's actually enforce, right, the psychologist's client privilege, right? Whatever they tell us, we don't tell anybody. We don't care what the warden says. And the social workers have to stand up and say, nah, that ain't cool. And if you get enough of them doing it, then it will be enforced. So finally, they said, okay, let's be part of the solution, not part of the problem. All right? A quick history of mass incarceration, okay? And y'all just got to bear with me. I'm just going to give you a lot of facts and figures. What time is this class over? I told you I like to talk. 11:45. All right, we'll get out of here at 11:46. All right? Okay. So, of course, the death of slavery, 1865, okay, to be 1867, depending on where you were, right? In Texas, it took almost 2 years for them to know that they were free. So, the political and economic infrastructure in the South was in shambles because of the Civil War, okay? Plantation owners were suddenly destitute. They had nobody to work the fields. Industry was disorganized. 4 million slaves were suddenly free. So 9 southern states, they adopted vagrancy laws, which made it an offense not to work. And this mechanism created the first selective mass incarceration. This was the first mass incarceration, where now you have hundreds of thousands of blacks in the criminal justice system for laws like he spoke too loud to a white woman. I'm telling you, you can read this. I don't have time to go over this for you. This is something, if you're interested in it, you can research it for yourself. If they didn't have work, then they were considered a vagrant, put into the justice system, and then put back out onto the plantations. Okay, that's how it was. That was what was going on. All right. So this led to civil rights legislation, which eventually had these laws overturned. Okay, that was the first pushback. So yeah, I just added some pictures like this, you know what I mean, to let you know that this was real. We all know, right? We all know. Okay, so the beginning of Jim Crow from 1867, so 2 years after the slaves were set free, until 1890, the federal government got involved in building the South. What did this lead to? It led to a lot of blacks voting, assuming positions of power. 15% of the power in the South were held by blacks. They were mayors, all right? They were assistant mayors. They had a lot of power, okay? Black schools opened, literacy rates climbed, successful black businesses. And this is like a miracle if you consider 1865 to 1890. But the reaction was very swift, okay? The reaction You know, the lynchings, the bombings, the mob violence, the creation of the Ku Klux Klan. This was a reaction to this. Okay? So vague laws were passed targeting blacks, such as mischief, insulting gestures. And you can go back and see this stuff. They're like, you know, it's history now, but they're still on the books. I'm not saying that they're laws now. I'm saying you can research the law itself and see that this is really what it was. Okay? So they were heavily fined and worked into the convict leasing market. If you're heavily fined and you can't pay back that fine, well, then how do you pay it? What? Labor. Right. You want to do more time. You're going to do more time. You're going to do more labor. You're back on the plantation. That's what happened. So what I'm trying to show you is that mass incarceration is not an accident. It's part and parcel of our society. And you have to have people standing up saying, enough is enough. All right? Enough is enough. Especially social workers. Okay? All right. No more pictures, right? What do they say? Pictures are worth 1,000 words. Okay? So this was the black organization. This was the blacks organizing against the Jim Crow laws. All right? So you see some of these signs. The absence of democracy. Jim Crow must go. Okay? All right. So the death of Jim Crow started in the 1940s. All right. Come over here and get some of this water. So, of course, you know, the blacks began leaving the South, migrating to the North and the West, looking for opportunities. As a matter of fact, my family actually came from, my great-grandmother's family came from Florida. And you guys know about Greenwood in Oklahoma? You guys know about that? I don't want to go too far in that. Anyway, my family came from Florida, which is the deep South, and Oklahoma, which is kind of the South. And we've been in Los Angeles almost 100 years now. Okay? Even though on my mother's side, that's my father's side. On my mother's side, actually, my great-grandmother is actually Irish. Irish, right? I don't know if you know the politics of that, but when the Irish first came to this country, they were treated as like dirt. So a lot of the men married black women, and a lot of the white Irish women married black men. Okay, and that's what happened. You know, my great grandmother married a black man, had my grandmother who's mulatto, and then my mother married my father. So, you know, I don't want to get lost in that story, but it's a kind of long story. Okay. World War II puts America on the world stage. So when blacks started coming back from overseas, they were like, man, this is messed up, right? Like we're fighting for this country. We come back and we can't eat it in the same restaurant. What were we fighting for then? What were we fighting for? We're fighting for American values, but these are the real American values. So then they began, a lot of blacks started becoming activists. This is when the NAACP was founded. All right. So you have these guys that are coming back and they're like, man, I used to be able to walk around with a gun and I'm killing for my country. And the people over there see us as liberators, but we're enslaved when we come back here. So this was the reaction to it. They began winning cases. 1944, it ended all the white primary elections. It's a long story what that is. 1946, segregation on interstate buses were unconstitutional. Okay, this is when the law went into effect. Okay, 1946. That's when the law went into effect. But it wasn't enforced, which is when, Martin Luther King and the Freedom Riders, that happened in the 60s. So it took 20 years for people to say, man, these laws are on the books, man, let's do something about it. Okay? 1948, voided real estate purchase agreements that were discriminatory. 1954, the schools were desegregated. Again, the backlash was severe. So understand what's happening. There's this attitude here. There's an attitude like, no, we're not going to take it anymore. The late 1930s, early 1940s, right? We're not going to take it anymore. So this is the attitude, which leads to the NAACP, all right? The NAACP is just using the law, and they begin winning these cases in the 40s, 1944, 1946, 1948, okay? If you ever wonder why there's so many blacks in the urban areas where there's these projects and things like that, because this is the only place where they could buy, all right? There was certain places that like it was red zoned, like you can only buy here. You can only buy here. And that's what led to those concentrations of minorities in those areas. And then what does that lead to? Because of that intergenerational trauma, it leads to more police presence. And what does that lead to? Incarceration. Okay? So in 1954, the schools were desegregated, right? The backlash was severe. Killings, bombings of black churches, homes, terror campaigns were commonplace. All right? That's what happened. Now, the beginning of mass incarceration started in the 1960s. All right? This is what we have to be careful about. And you should know this because of social media. Rhetoric, language. The way we use language is very important. All right? The rhetoric of law and order began in the 1950s as a reaction to the civil rights movement. That's the language that's being used. But what's the attitude behind the language? Get in your place. They're saying law and order. Why are they saying law and order? Why can they use that language? Because people are marching in the streets. No, we need law and order. We need people walking down the street making noise. You're not worried about law and order when you're breaking the law. But when people resist, oh, law and order. All right? So that began in the 1950s as a reaction to the civil rights movement. Martin Luther King was the conservatives' target with his claim, civil disobedience. So we look at Martin Luther King, we're like, wow, he was so brave. He was so this, he was so that. There's streets named after him and, you know, he did all of this stuff. But during his time, they were saying his civil disobedience, right, that approach to raising awareness of the injustices in society, which he called civil disobedience, they say, oh, this was the cause of crime. So it's because of that that we need more law and order. You see where this is going? Okay, you see where this is going? And you have people working behind the scenes, and they're working to get county laws, city laws, state laws, national laws changed, and we're not aware. We're not aware of what's going on. Okay? So 1968, there was a lot of riots across the American cities. And these were all urban centers, Los Angeles, Detroit, Chicago, places like that. When that happened, it cemented the agenda of get tough on crime and law and order. And it led to a series of presidents using that rhetoric to come to power. And then when they actually came to power, then of course they had to do something about it because they ran on that platform. Okay? So by 1968, a poll reflected that 81% of the population, the majority of Americans, agreed that law and order had broken down in this country, and they blamed the Negroes for starting the riots. See? You see where this is going? All right? Okay. So in the 80s, under Reagan, who also ran on that law and order platform, okay? And let me make something clear. Let me make something clear. Even though I have been through the system, right? Like I know I broke laws, okay? I know that. And I'm not saying people who break laws shouldn't be taken to task. I'm not saying that, okay? But what if I had never been in those conditions in the inner city? Right? What if my parents were allowed to generate or to create generational wealth? They could buy a house in a nice part of town, and then the value of that house increases so that they can give me the proper clothes. I mean, you all know, you go to school and you don't got no Nikes on, you got no fresh Jordans. You a sucker, man. What's up, right? I don't want to be a sucker in middle school. I don't want to wear stuff from Payless, right? So I'm going to do something about it. When I'm 16, I'm going to go do something about it. Now, what if my parents have been allowed, right, and my grandparents and my great-grandparents have been allowed to create that generational wealth that we know about now? You buy a house now, and in a year, it's worth $200,000 more than what you bought it for. What if? You see? Okay, now then take that and multiply it by 16 million people. Okay? Okay, so in the 1980s, under the Reagan administration, an anti-drug campaign, it sensationalized the conditions of the inner cities, which were suffering from economic collapse. So understand this, in the 1970s, 70% of black men had blue-collar jobs. By 1987, 17 years later, it was only 27%. That's what led to the discontent. That's what led to the crack boom, because it was an easy way of making money. Okay? It was an easy way of making money that blacks had access to. All right? So, and another thing that was happening is, there was a lot of iron working jobs. Like, GM would come into Chicago, they would come into Cleveland, they would come into Indianapolis, they would open up these huge factories, and they would employ a lot of blacks. That's where that number comes from, 70%. So in the cities, in the big cities, there was jobs. But by 1987, those jobs started going overseas. So now you have all of these black men, they're unemployed. And sometimes that's generational. The father was unemployed, the son grows up, he's unemployed. Okay, so it was down by 27%. I'm sorry, it was down to 27%. So this strategy, right? I'm talking about this anti-drug campaign, right? That strategy bore fruit. There were thousands of stories were run about gangbangers, crack whores, crack babies, welfare kings, queens, and inner city predators. That's journalism coming in and shaking hands with politics. All right? You have politicians, they come and they go to the journalist, Time magazine, all these different magazines, and they say, oh, run a story about this, run a story about this, run a story about this, so that they can get elected. Okay? And that thousands of stories. All right? So then legislation allocated billions of dollars and other innumerable resources for drug offenses, especially crack. Why crack? Why? Why is this hyper focus on crack? Why? Because crack can be manufactured very cheaply and sold very cheaply. You can buy a $5 bump of crack if you want. Whereas if you want something more expensive like heroin, you need $50, $100, something like that. So if you focus on crack, who are you focusing on? The poor, right? The minorities. It's in the language. You have to pay attention to the language, because behind the language is a mood. There's an attitude you have to be aware of. Okay, so there's specific words that are used in these different campaigns, but behind it there's like this agenda. All right, that social workers have to say, wait, hold up, what are we talking about here? All right, because okay, so just a side fact. What's the number one drug problem in America? What's the number one drug problem in America? It causes more problems than all of the other drugs combined. No. No. It's closer than that. Alcohol. Alcohol is responsible for about 50,000 deaths a year, millions of cases of domestic violence, millions of cases of child protective services. It's alcohol. Why aren't these campaigns focusing on that? See, it's in the language. You have to pay attention. Okay? All right. So the jails and the prisons exploded with brown and black people. Exploded. Because these policies were focused on the urban centers. Who's in the urban centers? All right? 1/4 of black male population was incarcerated by 1991. And the reason why I use the black male population is because they have the highest number of, they have the highest residency numbers in jails and prisons across the country. All right. It's like 1 in every 4 of black men will be arrested, and they'll have a jacket. Okay. Latinos is like 1 in 6, so they're right there. All right. It's right there. Okay. All right. The jail and prison population, it ballooned from 350,000 to now 2.3 million in these 20 years. Just think about that. Just think about that for a second. All right? The population, it 6 times over in 20 years. Just think about the families that are devastated by that. Just think about that. I've seen it, man. So the feds, they have like Con Air. Anybody seen a movie, Con Air? Right? That's real, right? Like they fly you everywhere and stuff. So they have like these depots where they fly you. I got sentenced in Philadelphia. I asked the judge to go to Georgia because I had some family down there. So they transport you by plane. So they transported us from, they have their own, they don't use the regular airports. They have their own runways all over the country. So they took us to Atlanta. We went from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania to Atlanta, Georgia. And when we got to Atlanta, it was all of these planes from all over the country, federal planes. They're white with black windows, so you see them, you don't know who it is, what it was, the feds. And so you get off of these planes and the planes are like, they're like around each other, like this, boom, boom, boom. And then the people are in the middle. The prisoners are in the middle, right? And then they line everybody up, and then, if you're going somewhere, then they call your name, and then you go and you get on that plane, all right? I've never in my life saw so many brown and black people in one place. Thousands of people just lined up in shackles. And I was like, this is a crime against humanity. No doubt, people have committed crimes. But what are the circumstances that led to those crimes? When I saw that, it was just like, these people are just missing from their families, right? They're just missing from their families, right? It's a shame. It's really, really bad. So by 2001, 2.3 million. And this expansion was due to policy changing, not rising crime rates. There was no more new crimes being committed. It wasn't that. It was simply because of policy changes. Reagan ran on that platform, and then after him Bush, and then after him Clinton. And we know Clinton, he had to apologize. He was trying to get his wife elected, so he apologized like, yeah, we had something to do with mass incarceration. We're sorry. Please vote for my wife. Right? So he apologized, but it was intentionally done. So you have the weight of the justice system being put on the backs of certain people, and they can't fight back. They don't have the resources. That's really what's happening. All right? So if some of you are thinking about like starting your own nonprofit or something like that, just, it doesn't matter what field you're in. Like even if you're just advocating for elderly people, do your job. Right? Like be passionate about really, really helping humanity. Be passionate about it. And then collaborate with other organizations. There's a lot of money out there. Believe me. I mean, there's a lot of money out there. We just signed a contract the other day with the county for like 450 grand, right? Over just a 3-month period. There's a lot of money out there, but you make it about something. Help, like really, really try and help people. Make a difference. If you don't do it, who's going to do it? Right? This is what you're being trained to do. All right? Okay. This is a picture of, this is a picture of California. This is CDC here, California Department of Corrections. Look how packed in they are. This is what led to people filing a suit against the state of California, and the Supreme Court judges, they accepted it. They were like, yeah, this is crazy. You got too many people locked up. And cruel and unusual punishment is because in these environments, what happens? They're going to start fighting, right? What else is going to happen? They're going to get sick, right? COVID devastated the prisoners, devastated. And because we work in the prisons, we have firsthand stories. We had students who actually died. Like they were healthy, nothing wrong. They contract COVID, and they're no longer with us because they can't get, proper medical care. They can't get the masks, or they get substandard masks. The guards are the ones who's going in and out of the prison, so they're the ones that's bringing it in. I mean, it's I can go on and on and on, but we're running out of time. So, this is what led to California having to change their laws. And I'll give credit to, California. They're trying to make amends. I will say that. And I'm saying when I talk to judges and when I talk to public defenders and things like that, like their attitude is changing. I will say that their attitude is changing, and they were forced to change. But it's working. It's working, and we get calls all the time. I had a chaplain who visited us. He's a chaplain over a prison up in Utah, and they have 1,700 inmates. And he came to us, number one, to ask us, okay, how do we run an educational program? Like, how do we set that up? And we sat with him and just gave him some ideas, on how to do it. But, it's like that. They recognize that California is the place. If you go and you talk to the organizations in California, they're going to tell you what needs to happen to be successful. So the attitudes are changing. So I will say that. Okay. So for almost 4 decades, 40 years, California has been amongst the states with the highest rates of incarceration, and also faced the highest recidivism rate. So recidivism is the propensity of someone to get arrested for a crime, get out, and because of a lot of barriers, they get locked back up. And then they get out and they get locked back up, right? That's one of our jobs. That's one of the things that we try to focus on, is to remove those barriers so that when somebody comes out, they can stay out. So, we set up, so for example, you come to us, if you just got out of jail. Matter of fact, I got a call yesterday. Somebody just got out of jail. He said he just got out of jail in Riverside. Just did some time. He doesn't have his ID. So we give him free ID vouchers. All right, you can come to us, save your $30. We'll give you a free ID voucher, right? Because we have a partnership with DMV. What's the next thing? He might need to get his birth certificate before he can get his ID. But he doesn't have the $70 to get the birth certificate. So we pay for that. Okay? And then we have caseworkers, we have case managers who they're trained to get people's social security cards. So you can come to us, you get all your I-9 stuff right away, all right, taken care of. Then what's the next thing? Housing. And in California, that's a big problem, all right? So we have to help them with housing. So we have contracts or partnership agreements with other organizations, you know what I mean? To okay, we have a client, He needs a bed. What is the agreement? How can we, and it depends on who he is and how long he's been gone. Will probation pay for it? Will parole pay for it? Can he pay for it himself? It's a lot of factors. But the fact that they have someone to work through that is important. Another thing that we have is a partnership with a pantry. So they can come to us and get a free bag of food. And it's like, essentials. It's like rice, beans, some canned vegetables, some canned fruit, some sugar, some boxes of cereal, snacks. It's about $50, $60 worth of food that they can keep in their pocket. All right. These are the barriers that people have to overcome when they come home from jail or from prison. These are barriers: housing, healthcare, ID, transportation. We try to help them with all of these things so that they can get a fresh start. All right. And so California has faced the highest recidivism rate between 2000 and 2009 at 61, 67%. Nationally, it's about 45%. Right. So nationally, if two people come home from jail, no, wait, let me think. Nationally, if 4 people come home from jail, right, 2 people are going to go back. In California, if 4 people come home, about 3 people are going back. All right? And it's because normally it's housing, and sometimes this is where you guys come. Who's going to go ahead and become a clinical social worker? Again, why was this side so quiet for? All the clinical social. Oh, you guys separated yourself. Okay, I see. They say, oh no, those guys. We don't want to be with those guys. No, but this is where you can help. Okay, the clinical, and there's a lot of money in it too, right? Don't let nobody tell you you can't make any money in this field. You can. Okay, you can. Now, you may have to be kind of like independent, but you can still make a lot of money. All right, because I know that's an issue, right? We have to make money, right? We have to. So, try to get the best of both worlds. You make money, but you're also helping people. And I'll talk more about that trauma in a minute. But in 2011, like I was telling you about, the Supreme Court ordered California to decrease their prison population by 33,000. They had to let 33,000 people go. Now, why is this an issue? Because if you let 33,000 people go, what's going to happen? They're coming back. You didn't prepare them. You just locked them up. You didn't teach them anything. You didn't, give them coping skills. You didn't teach them, financial literacy. They're coming right back. Like I said, 3 out of 4, they're coming right back. So you let go 33,000, right? 21,000 are going to be coming right back. They're coming right back. All right, that's a problem. And that was because the prison conditions constituted an 8th Amendment violation. I talked to you guys about that already. Okay, just some despair is what I was trying to show you here. All right, just some despair. I think this is my last slide. Some inmate psychology. Most inmates are from the inner cities. Poverty, abuse, violence. This is an everyday thing. Every day. For these conditions, this was purposely done. This was purposely done. If you put people in high stress environments, this is the only outcome. And when I'm saying high stress environments, I'm talking about South Central LA, right? Chicago, the west side, Chicago, west side of Chicago. That stuff was purposely done. Lack of education, lack of family harmony, lack of positive role models. This is what I wrote my thesis on. I wrote my thesis. You guys can look it up here. Trauma, overwhelmingly common. 65% of the incarcerated population has experienced some major traumatic event before prison. A lot of times the trauma is what leads to the drug abuse, which leads to the criminal offense. When I was doing my thesis, I interviewed probably 3 dozen people. 100% of them had trauma in their background before they went to prison. 100%. I'm talking about major trauma. One guy, he was 15 And he watched with his own eyes, because he was running with some drug dealers. And one of the users, she didn't pay her debt. And what they did was they put some gasoline in a tire. They put the tire over her so that she couldn't move, and they lit her on fire and made him stand there and watch. At 15. He started using drugs because those images, he was dreaming about them, having nightmares about those images. And he never got treatment for it. That's one example. The women, whatever you can think of that can happen to a woman has happened to her. She was molested at a young age. She was raped by the time she was 12. She had a baby by the time she was 14. She was forced into prostitution by the time she was about 16 or 17, right? She went to prison maybe around 19. You see where I'm going? These are the type of people that are in prison, and they didn't get help. They didn't get help. So 65% of this population has experienced some major traumatic event. 75% of the incarcerated population meets the criteria for substance dependence and or abuse. And they're not getting help in there. They're not. How do I know? Because they come to us and we've got to try to sort it out at our center. And they won't talk to, even if it was available, because of the policies in the prisons, they're not going to talk to them. They're not going to talk to him. All right? So distrust of law enforcement, right? Which side are you on? You know, I mean, it's a deep question, right? Because we need law enforcement, but we know that a lot of times the policies are, unjust. You guys are lucky. I'm done. Any questions? I told you, 46 after.